Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. Today, we're going to be taking a look at U.S.-China relations. As we enter this new era with, a familiar face in charge, it's 2025. And Donald Trump has just started his second term as president of the United States. So his first call after the inauguration wasn't to a traditional ally, but to Chinese President Xi Jinping. What does this tell us about the future for these two global powerhouses?
Well, this call and the events surrounding it, I think, paint a fascinating picture. So you see this call to Xi Jinping came right after Putin and Xi had their own conversation.
Okay.
And that conversation took place while Trump was literally being sworn in.
The timing of that seems pretty deliberate.
Yeah, it does. And I think it really underscores an important point that our sources are highlighting here. Over the past decade, the relationship between Russia and China has deepened considerably. We're seeing increased trade. You see political alignment, economic cooperation. It's a far cry from those predictions that these two nations would end up competing against each other.
So are we seeing the emergence of a new power bloc?
It's certainly a possibility. What's interesting is that Russia and China seem to be using each other as sources of international legitimacy. So think high-level visits, public expressions of support, almost like a coordinated effort to present a united front.
So how does this tie into Trump's strategy? At least what our sources suggest is his strategy.
Well, there seems to be a disconnect between the reality on the ground and the assumptions that are underpinning U.S. policy. The information we've gathered suggests that Trump's still operating under the belief that he can drive a wedge between Russia and China.
But as we just discussed, that doesn't seem very likely, given their, increasingly close relationship.
Exactly. And the irony is that some of Trump's actions, the sanctions, the trade wars, they may have actually driven Russia and China closer together. So instead of fostering integration with the U.S., he's kind of inadvertently contributed to further disintegration.
So essentially, he's playing right into their hands.
That's one way to look at it. Our sources suggest that we're witnessing the rise of a big two, where the combined power of Russia and China, and potentially others like India, begins to surpass the U.S. in certain areas, particularly as traditional U.S. alliances weaken.
And this is all happening as Trump ramps up his confrontational approach to China. So let's maybe delve into some specifics on that.
Okay, sure. So Trump's second term seems to be like a continuation of his America First agenda. And so we're seeing tariffs imposed, accusations of China exporting fentanyl, and then just a concerted effort to limit China's global trade influence.
It sounds like a recipe for escalating tensions.
It certainly has the potential, but what's really intriguing is how China is responding. They're not backing down. Instead, they're taking strategic steps to counter these pressures.
Okay, so give us some examples. What kind of countermeasures are we talking about?
Well, our sources point to a few key areas. First, China is further solidifying its ties with Russia, and this is a move that could be seen as a direct counter to U.S. attempts to isolate both countries.
Strength in numbers.
Precisely. Second, China's diversifying its supply chains, so this reduces their reliance on the U.S. and potentially mitigates the impact of any trade restrictions.
So they're essentially trying to become more self-sufficient.
It seems like that's the strategy. And finally, there are some indications that China might be preparing for economic countermeasures, including the possibility of currency devaluation.
That sounds pretty drastic. Is there any evidence to support this claim?
Well, one of our sources, the Japanese newspaper NKY, suggests that China might even consider leveraging its U.S. Treasury holdings to disrupt the U.S. stock market.
Wow.
It's a bold claim, and it highlights the potential for serious economic warfare.
It sounds like both sides are willing to play hardball.
There's certainly no lack of willingness to use economic leverage, and we can't forget about China's dominance in another crucial area, rare earth metals.
Right, and those are essential for high-tech industries, correct?
Sure. Absolutely, yeah. Everything from smartphones to renewable energy technologies relies on these materials, and China controls the lion's share of global production, which gives them immense leverage in any conflict with the U.S.
It's almost like holding the keys to the kingdom of modern technology.
And they're very aware of that power. Our sources also raise the possibility of another dimension to this conflict, proxy wars.
Oh, okay. That sounds ominous. What are we talking about here?
So essentially, indirect conflicts between the US and China that are playing out in other countries. Our sources highlight potential flashpoints like Mexico, which is embroiled in the fentanyl trafficking issue, and the Philippines, which is strategically important in the South China Sea.
Right.
It's a reminder that this rivalry has the potential to destabilize entire regions.
So we're not just looking at like a war of words or a trade war,
Yeah.
but potentially like a series of proxy conflicts with, global implications.
That's a sobering thought. And all of this is happening against a backdrop of heightened personal animosity between Trump and Xi.
Yeah, it's fair to say that their personal styles and ideologies are contributing to this escalation in tensions.
It's definitely a factor. While there might be attempts to establish back channels of communication, the potential for misunderstanding and escalation remains significant.
After all, we've seen this movie before, right? Remember the incident during Trump's first term with the Huawei executive's daughter being detained in Canada at the behest of the U.S.?
Yeah, it's a stark reminder of the tactics that were employed. And there's no guarantee that they won't resurface, creating another hostage situation and further straining relations.
And to add fuel to the fire, China has been quite public about its military advancements. It's almost like a show of force, like a way of signaling their strength and preparedness in response to Trump's rhetoric.
It's classic strategic signaling. China wants to make it clear that they're not to be underestimated and they're willing to stand their ground.
This is painting a rather tense picture, what did you say? And keep in mind, we're only in the first week of Trump's second term, so it begs the question, where do we go from here?
That's the million-dollar question.
Okay. So we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive. We've seen that Trump's return has brought back this confrontational approach to China, but he might be operating under some outdated assumptions. The global landscape has shifted, and Russia and China are now a formidable force to be reckoned with.
Right.
They seem prepared to push back against this U.S. pressure using a variety of economic and strategic tools.
And it's a force that seems prepared to push back against U.S. pressure, using a variety of economic and strategic tools.
So the question is, will this intensified competition between the U.S. and China lead to a more chaotic and unpredictable world order, or could it eventually lead to some sort of negotiated division of power and influence? We'll explore those possibilities and more in the second part of our deep dive.
There's certainly much more to unpack as we delve deeper into this complex, fascinating relationship.
Stay tuned. We'll be right back to continue our exploration.
Looking forward to it. It's important to remember that the sources we've been analyzing, they offer a specific perspective, one that emphasizes the potential for China to emerge as like the dominant power.
That's a good point. We need to be cautious about accepting any single narrative as like the absolute truth. It's crucial to consider alternative viewpoints and recognize the complexity of this rivalry.
Exactly. While our sources paint this picture of a rising China and a declining U.S., it's important to remember that the U.S. still possesses, significant advantages. It has a robust and diversified economy, a powerful military with global reach, and a network of alliances, even if some have been strained, of course.
That's true. The U.S. is not just going to vanish from the global stage.
Right. And we also need to consider that China faces its own set of challenges. A rapidly aging population, environmental concerns, internal political pressures could potentially limit their ability to exert influence on that global scale.
So it's not a simple equation of China rising and the U.S. falling.
No, not at all. It's a complex interplay of strengths and weaknesses, opportunities and challenges.
One aspect that particularly stood out to me in the sources was the mention of potential proxy wars, like the idea of this rivalry spilling over into other countries and regions, potentially escalating into, larger conflicts. It's a chilling thought.
It's a scenario we need to take seriously. We've already witnessed how U.S.-China tensions can play out in places like Taiwan and the South China Sea. And so it's not far-fetched to imagine these tensions, igniting conflicts in other parts of the world, particularly in regions where both countries have those strategic interests.
This reminds us that we live in an interconnected world. And even conflicts that seem distant can have ripple effects that touch all our lives.
Precisely. And it highlights the importance of diplomacy, communication, and a commitment to finding peaceful resolutions to those global challenges.
While the situation can feel a bit overwhelming, it's crucial to remember that we are not powerless. We can stay informed, engage in constructive dialogue, and hold our leaders accountable for making decisions that promote peace and stability.
Absolutely. We are not merely passive observers in this global drama. We all have a role to play in shaping the future.
Our sources focused quite heavily on the economic aspects of this rivalry. And China's economic rise has been one of the most significant developments of the 21st century. They've become a major player in global trade and have the potential to really disrupt the global economy.
That's correct. China's control over those critical supply chains, like rare earth metals, gives them significant leverage in any economic conflict. And their decisions have far-reaching consequences, impacting industries and consumers worldwide.
It's a reminder of how interconnected our world truly is. What happens in one part of the world can have significant repercussions elsewhere.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important for countries to diversify their supply chains and reduce their dependence on any single nation.
So amidst all this complexity, what can the average person do to make sense of it all?
Well, I think it's essential to develop a nuanced understanding of these shifting power dynamics and the potential for conflict. We need to be critical thinkers, questioning the narratives presented to us and seeking out diverse perspectives.
It also means that we need to be prepared for a future that's likely to be more volatile and unpredictable than the one we've become accustomed to.
That's right. The old rules of the game may no longer apply. Adaptability and resilience will be crucial in navigating this new global landscape.
Before we move on to the final part of our deep dive, let's just briefly recap what we've covered so far.
Okay, sure. So we've explored the potential consequences of a second Trump presidency, particularly regarding China. The relationship between the U.S. and China is becoming increasingly adversarial, with the possibility of economic conflict, proxy wars, and even direct military confrontation.
We've also learned that the global landscape is shifting. With the rise of China and other powers challenging that U.S. dominance, this multipolar world is likely to be more complex and unpredictable, requiring us to adapt and rethink our assumptions about global order.
And perhaps most importantly, we've been reminded that we're not just passive bystanders in this unfolding drama. We have the power to shape the future through our choices, our actions, and our engagement in the global conversation.
Stay with us as we continue our exploration in the final part of this deep dive. It's fascinating how these personal dynamics can influence international relations on such a grand scale. We're talking about global power dynamics here, the fate of nations. But it almost feels like sometimes it boils down to personalities and egos of just, a handful of leaders.
Yeah, it's true that the personal styles and ideologies of individuals like Trump and Xi can have a significant impact on how things play out. And in this case, we've got two strong-willed leaders with very different visions for their nation's role in the world.
Almost like a clash of the titans, right?
Yeah.
Two outsized personalities kind of vying for dominance on the world stage.
Yeah, and while that's a very captivating narrative, we do have to remember that international relations are complex and individual personalities are only one piece of the puzzle.
Right. Of course, there's economic interests, there's geopolitical strategies, historical rivalries, and countless other factors at play. But, it's hard to deny the impact of personal relationships or the lack thereof on the world stage.
Absolutely. Trust or mistrust between leaders can make or break negotiations, alliances, and even the prospects of peace.
And when you have leaders like Trump, who's known for his unpredictable and sometimes impulsive behavior, it injects a level of uncertainty into, an already volatile situation.
Yeah, and that unpredictability can be a double-edged sword. So on the one hand, it can make it challenging for other nations to anticipate Trump's actions, which can give him an advantage in negotiations. But then on the other hand, it can make him appear unreliable, potentially damaging relationships and undermining alliances.
It's a high-stakes gamble, and it's really unclear whether it will ultimately pay off or backfire.
Only time will tell. But one thing is for sure is that we're living through a period of profound transformation in the global order. The old rules are being rewritten, and the future is uncertain.
It's a bit daunting, but it's also exhilarating to be witnessing such a pivotal moment in history.
I agree. It's a time of great challenge and great opportunity, and the decisions made today will shape the world we live in tomorrow.
So as we conclude this deep dive, what is the most crucial takeaway you hope our listeners gain from our conversation?
Well, I hope they leave with a deeper understanding of the intricate and ever-evolving relationship between the U.S. and China. I hope they recognize the potential for both conflict and cooperation, and the importance of informed and engaged citizens in navigating this new global landscape.
Well said. I also hope they leave with a sense of wonder and curiosity about the world around them, and a desire to continue learning and exploring. As we've seen today, the more we learn, the more we realize how much we still don't know.
That's the beauty of knowledge. It's a never-ending journey of discovery.
And that's precisely what we strive for here on The Deep Dive, to spark your curiosity, challenge your assumptions, and empower you with knowledge. So until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.